Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Seamus Ford. I'm Landmark's Director of Community Engagement, and I want to welcome you to Landmark Difference Makers. Today, we're going to be interviewing Archie Holton and Betsy Densmore, who are the people behind the Academies for Social Entrepreneurship at UCLA. They support mission-driven entrepreneurs in developing sustainable ventures that address societal challenges. The Academy offers participants business training, expert mentorship, access to funding opportunities to help scale their social impact, and focuses on combining business strategies with a commitment to solving issues in areas like education, healthcare, the environment, and economic inequality. And I'm really, really excited about this interview, and I'm really, really excited that there is something like the Academies for Social Entrepreneurship in the world. I really appreciate both of you being here, Archie and Betsy. And rather than have me try to get it right, I'd like to have you introduce yourselves directly.
I'm Betsy Densmore. I founded Academies for Social Entrepreneurship in 2009, and I did so following a 6-year career as a Landmark staff person and many other training and development. I also have a history of running a community foundation, working for a large nonprofit that was all about environmental sustainability. And ASE led me into doing quite a lot of teaching on several campuses in the Los Angeles area.
That's great.
Yeah.
And Archie, how about you?
I own a construction company, a plumbing company, a handyman company. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Like, I like a business, I like setting it up, getting it running, and getting the hell out. I now own a restaurant with my partner. And I was the classroom leader in the Introduction Leaders program for 20 plus years. And one day I got a call from Betsy going like, I need someone who can run a forum. Will you do it? And I've been there ever since. So my background really is starting, generating, causing businesses, and then moving to the next one. So
Well, that must really that obviously has something to do with social entrepreneurship. And one of the things I understand about the Academies for Social Entrepreneurship is it's really there's two constituent groups. There's nonprofits and then there's students. Can you say a little bit about how that came to be organized?
Sure. The original academies didn't have students. So the first 10 or 20 we did were just focused on aligning our own trainers and mentors with cohorts of nonprofit organizations. We've always believed in cohorts because the training goes deeper and longer there. But then we stumbled on a partnership with UCLA, and the beauty of the partnership with UCLA was that they wanted us to include students in each of the cohorts that we created with a group of not-for-profit organizations. So now each academy is a cohort of not-for-profit organizations who are joined by a team of usually 5 students to work with them through the process of deciding what kind of a business they want to make and making it.
That's a really remarkable combination of business, making a difference, young people, existing organizations. It is just a remarkable chemistry there.
yeah, in the beginning, Seamus, what was the most fun is that Betsy was responsible, accountable for the nonprofits, and the Stanley Chair, Andy Atkinson, was accountable for the students, and my job was the interaction between the students and the nonprofits. So it really did work out really well. So it was a chemistry from the get-go,
Yeah.
and it's been extraordinary.
Betsy, how did this, like, what was the original vision?
Oh, the original vision was the first generation of this organization was created by a fellow named Mark, who was a very successful real estate investor who was now ready to retire into something that gave him more satisfaction as a change maker. And he wanted to apply what he'd learned in Landmark and what he'd learned in Vistage and other executive training organizations like, well, it doesn't matter. And one of the things that was common was that a lot of the learning, almost all the learning took place in groups. So he hatched the idea of creating learning groups, which we call leadership forums, where nonprofit executives could get together and talk about what they were challenged by. In particular, he wanted to recruit nonprofit executives who were doing social enterprises. And we did that model pretty much on the using his money for a couple of years. And what became clear was that it needed to be a little more focused than kind of people showing up and talking about what their problems were today. Hence, we hatched the idea of an academy where there was a distinguished process for walking people through either starting or building a social enterprise within their not-for-profit organization. And that attracted more not-for-profits, and it also attracted more people who were willing to underwrite the process or contract with us to do it for organizations that they cared about. So that was Genesis.
The social enterprise, which is within social entrepreneurship,
They're not quite the same, but
they're not quite the same. How are they
yeah.
different?
Well, they're different because social entrepreneurship refers to the person or persons who are actually running the business. Social enterprise is the business. As I am struck by one of the changes over the last 10 years is a lot more people want to be social entrepreneurs, which is to say they want to start businesses that have a social mission, at least in the background, if not in the foreground. But social enterprise has tended to be a term that's largely used within the not-for-profit community to define businesses that have been started as a part of their operation.
Mm. And there's a term that's often used in business, or increasingly used in business, the triple bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
That is a commitment to money, mission, and environmental responsibility.
And do you find that begins to extend into some form of social responsibility as well?
Yes. Yes.
You know, we've interviewed a lot of people that have commitments to environmental causes, and what inevitably gets revealed in our discussions with them is that it's all about people. You know,
Right.
when it's all said and done, it's all about people.
Yeah, I think the reason the third triple bottom, the three, if you're being rigorous, the mission piece addresses other aspects of social responsibility, but the environmental piece got put in because businesses that are environmentally responsible are also paying attention to what their vendors are doing, how they treat their customers, like they're like looking in every direction at what they can do to reduce, reuse, recycle, as well as in some cases run a business that actually does improve the environment, doesn't just protect it, but improves it. One of the things I'm doing in my semi-retirement is I have an investors group. We didn't get to talk about this, but I have an investors group of a few other women and myself, and a couple nights a month, we go through businesses that are being proposed on the GoFundMe platform, which is a crowdfunding platform. And one of the things that's, a new trend that I'm excited about is there are more and more people participate in crowdfunding for businesses that want to get started and don't necessarily appeal to venture capitalists because they're not going to be big money makers, but they are going to reduce the amount of pollution that's going into the air in Africa, or reduce or find new ways to use plastic bottles, or change the way people heal themselves. These are all businesses I've invested in, and it's all happening in crowdfunding.
You know, you work with a lot of students in the academy that haven't even necessarily started their careers, like undergraduates. Is there anything you see different about this generation with all of the well-established, clearly defined, rather intractable problems that they're very aware of, and how they're approaching, their their time on the stage?
Arch, you've spent more time with them in the last couple of years than I have. I mean, my fear from my nieces and nephews is that uh they're committed, but pretty intimidated by what the future may look like.
They're disconnected. The truth
Yeah,
is, they're disconnected. Um, and they don't see pathways to commitment as versus literally what's the driving force mostly is survival and staying in their own lane.
Now,
That's
how does the academy impact that?
at the moment I would say by Archie, but I don't tolerate it. I won't tolerate
right,
it. Like I said, last time I made them do being with, but it's not the only way. I
right.
make them pitch in front. They literally stand up like it's the introduction leaders program, and they stand in front of the room and they begin the pitch. And I stop them. I cause them. Why are we doing it? Why would I care? How come I would give you money? Like, what is this about? Until such time as they actually begin to generate themselves as a place to care from.
So
Sometimes I get in trouble.
that has to break up a lot of this, the fear, the cynicism, the intimidation that you were just referring
Yeah,
to.
I mean, we're committed that they're the future, and we're here to make sure that they know it and step big. And we do that with a lot of love. Archie has the most, by far the gift for getting people to stand up, but he's well supported by the rest of us, the rest of the team. We all agree. Nobody should leave. Everyone should leave a lot bigger than they came in.
Mm.
And it has a lot to do with who you're being. It's literally who I be with them. Sometimes people get triggered from the strangest things, but it's okay. We can be with, we've been trained to deal with people who get triggered by whatever it is they're being triggered by. That's something they're not used to, and that makes them inquisitive. Like I just yelled at you and you don't care. Yeah, I really don't care. Like, let's do this again. And literally it causes them to reevaluate where they are in the pathway and exactly what are the constraints that they've imposed on themselves. And then how Betsy trained me was literally, I don't, Betsy used to kick me under tables or tell me that, the horses are out of the barn because I just say what there is. And at UCLA, teachers there, professors there are under a lot of constraint. So I'm more constrained than I am, say, in my normal life, but I'm way outside the realm of constraint at UCLA compared to the way their faculties
Well,
are.
and even I am, which is another of the miracles that Andy created with us, because he appreciates that we don't have the same constraints he does.
um, there's nothing like, the one that I use to point that out a lot that works well for me is that I had a female student from UCLA who was doing a pitch for LGBTQA in Long Beach. And it looked like she was doing a book report on some financial stuff. Like I wanted to take a nap and go away. And I finally stopped it and said, look, you're smart, intelligent, well educated, you're beautiful, and you're literally going to go into the job market and some guy won't give you the job because you're a girl. What's that like? She said, that's awful. Yeah, now pitch from there. And the pitch was extraordinary, literally extraordinary. And then we had to deal with the fact that I told a UCLA student, you're beautiful because you're not allowed to do that. The legal department actually said, it's okay if you say ugly, but you can't say beautiful because it might imply something else. Well, the professors know that that's a constraint that they can't cross. I didn't know at the time, so I crossed it. Then I had to apologize.
Well, that phenomenon, that increased level of sensitivity is a constraint that I think a lot of people are dealing with. I wonder how that,
Yeah. It's
given that generation is sort of, there's obviously a commitment behind that sensitivity, but it's
yeah.
also a constraint. And that
And
generation that's really committed to that, that must be something they have to deal with.
We talked about it. Like when you're coming from the passion, a lot of that constraint disappears. Not always, but as a general rule. If people know who you are and they know that you're standing for who they are and what they're up to, a lot of that concern disappears because they know the possibility that you are. So we literally talk to who they are as a possibility and they get heard. And it's literally less of a constraint. Like literally, I want you to win and they know that. I want them to be successful and they know that. I want them to be expressed and they know that.
And I'd imagine that where, somebody might reflexively call you out on using a particular kind of word if they're really inspired by the possibility that somebody's creating, it's secondary.
Well, we've
So
had
the students did not say a word. The students worked fine. It was actually a member of the LGBTQ nonprofit organization that thought it was offensive that I had done so.
yeah.
But the students, they didn't hear it. They actually were moved by the fact that I was straight with them and that I didn't dance around it, that I was really straight with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting time that we're in with the, um, giving voice to the experience of marginalized people is incredibly important, and it's doing something that is impacting a historical inequity. And in many ways, the way in which it's being expressed is kind of a cudgel, and it's counterproductive to everything that people are, ultimately standing for.
Yep.
Yeah, we had an organization last program, which was Grow Cycling, which created a special kind of bike track in a predominantly Black neighborhood. And their original pitch was, it's not safe here. You can't ride your bike. You could get shot. The white police won't do anything like that. And I'm like, literally, I stopped right away and I was like, here's a couple of things. One, I don't want to go to your bike track because I got to go through a neighborhood that you've just described as not safe. That doesn't grow cycling, not in the way you intend. So let's restart that. And the second part is, whether we want to accept it or not, a lot of the people sitting on the other side of the desk are going to write the check, are going to hear like you just made them the big bad guy. Let's find a way not to make them the big bad guy and make what you're up to, which is your possibility, which is bringing families together for the purpose of riding bikes together in a secured area. One of the students was offended. The nonprofit was not. They actually heard it, they altered it, and they actually won last year.
But yeah, there's an expression, around Landmark. I'm sure it's elsewhere, but popular around Landmark of, you're either on the court or in the stands.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that a lot of that kind of reflexive correcting people or reflexive being offended on behalf of somebody else is not really on the court. Not really. I mean, it's on the court
No.
for something, but it's not really on the court for what the mission of your organization.
Correct, as a general rule.
How does somebody come to be a participant in the academy? Like, what are the backgrounds that?
There's students and nonprofits, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Two different pathways. So for the years that Betsy and I worked together, I took over being accountable for recruitment of nonprofits. Now Rob Triplett, who is on this call, is literally the spearhead. And we just reach out and talk to nonprofits. As a matter of fact, if you're interested in applying, you can go to academies-se.org and you'll see an apply button and you apply. And then we arrange, once you've done the application, we interview. And at UCLA, we literally reach out, they put it in the book going, here's a course that's available. We don't have to do much more than that at UCLA. There's about 400 students that apply, give or take, and we can only take 50. We just don't have the funding to do any more. We're a nonprofit organization that funds at UCLA. Like, we're nestled in UCLA, but we're a separate entity. We don't have the money to do another course, but it is a popular course because so many of the people actually get hands-on. They work like consultants. So they actually, when they go apply for consultancy, they can actually go, I was in the academies, and a lot of them know who that is. Oh, you work with nonprofits. Those guys are really hard to work with. Let us bring you in and give you an internship. Let's give you a shot at this. So they are selected mostly by Andy Atkinson. He's in one of those slides that slides by. He's the Stanley Chair of Economics. He brings in the students. And Betsy, Rob, and I, and Paul, who is also in this call, we reach out, make phone calls, whatever's necessary to fill our nonprofit quotas, and then do our interviews.
I should add, the UCLA Academy is our oldest and most successful academy. We've been at it 12 or 13 years. And I think, and one reason it is so successful is that it's the only academy where people are guaranteed that they're going to get a group of very smart students to work with the team of people that the not-for-profit brings in. But I should also say that we have done, I don't know, another 15 or 20 academies with other strategic partners, if you think of UCLA as a strategic partner. And in those cases, the partner has helped us to identify the not-for-profits they want us to work with. In many cases, those academies were sponsored by funders who have a cohort of nonprofits they're particularly trying to look after, like we did a bunch for people that are in the daycare space. And we did one for people who are in the sustainable seafood space, and we did another one for people who are in a particular neighborhood of Los Angeles. And those were possible because we had a strategic partner that wanted to support that particular kind of organization and was willing to help pay for it. So that model is also here. It's just not the one that we've been doing religiously, regularly, year after year.
Yeah, I want to make you feel older. 15, Bets.
Yeah.
This is 15 years at UCLA.
Yeah, I thought so, but I didn't want to say
it. There are, is there a profile that the typical participant would fit? Or do there similar characteristics? Or
there's some
desires?
things there's several things which we've made kind of minimum acceptable, just because if we break those rules, the odds of success go way down. And one is that the organization, first one is the organization has to have 3 people that are willing to go through the whole process, attend all the meetings, be responsive to students. The second one is that they ought to be they ought to be a year old, and they ought to have a budget that, what are we saying now, exceeds 100,000 at least. So in other words, they ought to have at least one staff person that's making some money. So it's not a program for someone who's got a bright idea and wants to use the academy to create it, because those folks don't usually succeed.
So the update, 150,000.
Mm-hmm.
And of the 3 to 5, one of them must be the decision maker. You can't just put 3 to 5 people. They have to be one person. If they decide they're going to sell bananas or whatever it is, you need someone who goes, yes, we're going to do that, and I don't have to tangle with the board. Literally.
Well, that criteria is really well thought through, clearly, and it reflects a commitment that whoever participates with you is successful. What is if you could describe it, like the syllabus of the whole process that an organization goes through or the individuals go through, what are the parts of it?
I'll do the first part if you do the last part, Ben.
Okay.
Or I'll do the first and the last, and you can do the in the middle. I don't care.
Rock on.
So they start with a SWOT. Well, actually, they start with filling out the application, which in itself, like the Introduction Leaders Program, literally starts having them think where they hadn't thought before. It really is a part of the program.
Mm-hmm.
That's followed by an interview. I've been doing the interviews, I don't know, for quite a few years after Betsy decided she was done doing interviews. And really what I'm looking for is there something there for the students to work on? Imagine they get halfway through and you find out they don't have any funding or they don't have anything to build a business. So I need to know that they're committed, that they have somebody who can drive it forward. And even in that, there's a conversation. And then the students begin a SWOT analysis. They actually take the nonprofit and go through the ins and out. And then nonprofits actually told
rank weaknesses, opportunities, threats, for those of you unfamiliar with that jargon.
And we actually have to have the nonprofits understand that they're not going to contribute anything other than the information. So a lot of the time the nonprofit comes in going like, we want to open a coffee shop. No, I don't care what you want to open up right now. What I want is the brand new, fresh eyes looking at a SWOT analysis and telling us what's the low-hanging fruit, not what it is you're dreaming. Because we've learned that the students will vary that SWOT analysis to match whatever it is that you say you want to do. Like they'll ask the questions in such a way to get it to look the way they think the nonprofit wants them to. And that's part of their learning process.
Right, because conversely, oftentimes our not-for-profit clients have come in with an idea which the students have found evidence for contradicting. In other words, as a result of the market research, the students and us normally have reason to dissuade the team from whatever they thought was a really good idea because we can tell that there isn't going to be a market.
Yeah. And that's a really rough one on both sides. The students
So,
don't want to do that, right? Like they're wanting to appease. So that's another place where the students actually get trained and develop, actually being, I work with them in the background to create, no, this is a bad idea in a way that leaves the nonprofit going, oh, we think we have a bad idea. Not like the students put it upon them, like they actually bring it around with evidence and stuff, such that the nonprofits generated that it came from them more often than not. And then
so
Betsy or I or Andy, if it gets too far, we'll actually have to step in and go, this one really is not gonna, there's no fruit on this. Go get something else.
the course as a whole, the incubator process, as we've designed it at UCLA and pretty much in general, is 5 to 6 months. And what we've just described, the process of doing a feasibility study, which is the SWOT, and then doing market research on ideas that get generated, it takes up almost the first half of the program because we think it's really crucial that they end up with a solid idea, a solid idea or two that makes sense. If you've done good feasibility research, then you can be more confident. And then the second half of the program, roughly, is developing the business plan. And there we start to drill down on what the budget has to look like and what the expenses are going to be, how is it going to be marketed, what kinds of operating costs will there be if you're going to have to build a product or develop services. I mean, a business plan. And then as people complete the pieces for a business plan, we finish not by making them write a business plan, although the students do that ultimately, but by putting together a pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Archie, why do we have them pitch?
Well, there's a number of reasons we have them pitch, but I want to jump back in time just a little because I want to make sure they come up with 3 to 5 ideas and then they do a market analysis. So it's not like they come up with one idea and then they run with it. They actually come up with 3 to 5 ideas. They do a market analysis, and then the nonprofit picks 2 or 3 of those, and then they go do a business analysis. Is something scalable? And then it gets down to picking the one, and then we do the business plan and stuff. But the pitching, I get the honor. Yeah, you'll need to edit that because I'm being moved. I have the honor and privilege of working with the nonprofits and the students to do pitching. As an ex-classroom leader of the Introduction Leaders Program, it gives me an opportunity to have them be really present to what they're creating and what they're causing. Not only because it has them moved, touched, and inspired by what they're up to and who they are, but also so that nonprofit can take that pitch deck and that business and literally use it to generate funds or interest in raising funds from venture capitalists. Literally, it's a way for them to move forward.
Yeah, well, Archie, I don't know if we're gonna edit that out. It's okay to be moved. I get moved all the time. However, you're pointing to something, for somebody that hasn't participated with Landmark before, I think it's really important, being in the presence of why you're doing something, the difference that it's making. I think that, a lot of us go through life not really paying much attention to the impact of the difference that we're having in the world. And then when we are paying attention to it, we often are keeping it at arm's length and kind of abstract. And, I hear something when you talk about them going and being able to talk to venture capitalists. It's an entirely different experience for the person listening if somebody is being used by, if you will, their raison d'etre, or they're just talking about it. Can you say more about that?
I can do that in a couple of ways, but I'm going to incorporate something else in there, Seamus. And I don't know that they will see the pictures, but one of the other things that the Academy enabled me to do and was that I was able to take students from UCLA and bring them to Russia, where we participated in a summit where we literally discovered that Russia was trying to understand what social enterprise was, but they really didn't have it. Like literally they were creating nonprofits, but there was no business entity at all involved. And over the next 4 years, with UCLA's help, we actually not only worked with ITMA University to get that grounded in that country, but the group that we were working with actually got Putin to sign social entrepreneurship into law. And so, to what you pointed to, you can see Betsy. I know everybody can see Betsy. That's one of the greatest parts of my life, to know like an entire country has access to that. But Betsy was the source. Like, I'm a part of this entire thing because Betsy brought me in. So there was a time when I came out of the advanced course, which is one of Landmark's courses, for those of you who do not know. And Betsy Dinsmore said, "You're going to go in the Introduction Leaders Program." And I was like, okay, whatever. And it really altered my life in such a way that anything became possible. And when I became a classroom leader for more than 2 years, Betsy and I co-led that course together. I was bidden by and given by, let's make a difference in the world that people can experience like it's a real thing. I wanted to be like Betsy. I wanted to live in the shadow of who she was and the difference that she's made her entire life. And so when she called one day and said, "You want to drive to San Salinas or San Jose with me?" I was like, okay, 6 hours in a car with Betsy, why not? And I never left. I'm still here because of the profound difference that gets to be made. So it alters the world. One of the times, the very first time I was in Russia, I was working with a Russian student, a female student. And the student wanted to have a nonprofit that taught art. And I'm like, "Why don't you do that?" She's like, "Because in Russia, I have to be an architect." I'm like, "Well, can't you do both?" And she started to cry. It created an incident, actually, because they thought I had done something to make her cry. But what she saw was the possibility of more for her life. The following year, Russia, a country where they make $800 a month, right, as an average, figured out how to raise $100,000 to have me and the students come back. Mostly, what we did was we created possibility where it didn't exist. Mostly, they just had me working with people doing their pitches. And literally, what you discover is like I could have people from Switzerland or wherever they were pitching. I didn't have to know what they were saying. All I had to do was find their heart. And once the heart came forward, literally the room would move. So it's like it literally is an outshoot of this work.
Well, let's just, if you would, talk a little bit more about this coming from the heart. Um, I'd have to think, Betsy, that that's part of what people get trained in the academy. Just, given what Archie said
Oh,
about
yeah.
you, knowing you,
Mhm.
how in the academy do you give people access to that?
I think we give people access to that by asking them to be authentic and by being authentic ourselves about what is in fact moving them and and then encouraging that, appreciating that, surrendering to that versus being, I mean, by the way, there are lots of incubators around now. There weren't when I started, but there are lots of incubators around, others for social enterprise that basically help people do business plans. But I think what's distinct about us is that we do have more attention on having people altered themselves as well as while they're building their businesses. And we do that because we know it makes life more fun, but also because we think it is likely to make the business a lot more successful.
Hmm.
Because people can be holistic about how they're doing what they're doing.
Well, I imagine it's also just very powerful. I mean, but part of running a nonprofit is there's always an ask,
Mhm. Right.
and who and what is making the ask is important.
Yes.
And um, you know, Archie had talked about kind of people coming in and having a concern for themselves. I want to do this thing.
Mhm.
And that's very disconnected from the possibility or the vision being fulfilled in the
Right,
world.
right.
How do you get people, I guess, present to the possibility that animates them?
Well, you started that right where you said, get present, get present. Because in the world outside, most people don't live in a world of being present. So one of the first things we do is we have the nonprofits and the students get, even the nonprofits aren't, they're like churning out a target or maniacs on a mission. Somewhere in the background, there's this difference that they're committed to making, but they're not present to it. So the first and foremost is to be present with it and get them present. As a matter of fact, in the last academies last year, I actually stopped class and made the students do a being with. I actually had them stand up, put your books down, and just be with each other, literally just to have them get presence. But it's also in the coaching when you, and that's one of the reasons I love it. I mean, as a 20 something year introduction leader program classroom leader, which is now something else, but literally it's in the coaching and having them do it until they really get the difference that they're making and the impact this makes and who that is in the world. And then it takes them over. And that's when you know that it's happened, when they're standing in front of a room of a group of people and the passion comes through and the being moved comes through. And then you know it's there.
Yeah, what I hear and what you're saying is it might say it another way as well. The person isn't speaking, it's the possibility that they want to make real in the world that's speaking.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Um, so this has gone on 15 years. This is a lot of people have gone through, a lot of students, a lot of nonprofits. Can you share with us some of the successes that you're particularly proud of?
Grow Good. So Grow Good actually created a microgreens, so plants and so forth. And here's what they say on their website. I'm actually reading: a flourishing social enterprise business of seedling and produce sales, 100% of which supports our transitional employment participant wages. So literally, they're now almost self-sustaining.
Jazz Hands, which was begun by someone who discovered that people with disabilities were greatly, their lives were enhanced by music, but there weren't many people who were willing to teach them music lessons and in particular to go to their house to teach them music lessons. So this woman built herself a cadre of people who were willing to do those kinds of house calls and worked it out so that the regional centers would pay for those kind of house calls and thus created a social enterprise that is causing lots of people with disabilities to make music all over
Hmm.
the LA area.
The Miramar Clinic.
Which one?
Miramar. This
Oh,
was after you've left.
yeah.
So it was a small version of Doctors Beyond Borders. It was some doctors based out of San Francisco that started a medical practice in Miramar. But in those areas, it's hard to get to patients. In the academy, they created telehealth. This is about a year and a half ago. And currently, according to their website, they now have 20 million active telehealth clinic programs running, meaning you actually would get on Zoom and talk to the doctor, and the doctor would prescribe and tell whatever you needed to do. Literally, through the program, they're now making a difference for about 20 million people in Miramar area, which is extraordinary, right?
Hmm.
Cancer Kinship is a support organization that works with people who are cancer survivors or making their way through and, working on being cancer survivors. And they identified that a lot of these cancer survivors needed wigs and we're going to go buy wigs somewhere. And they've now gone into the wig business.
Wow.
I wanted to do the United Way, but I don't have the numbers here in front of me. I thought Paul sent it. I just sent him a text sending the numbers for
Well,
you.
you could just do it in round numbers.
So United Way in Riverside, I think they had 15 people working for them and a $3.5 million budget. They now run the 211. They absorb the 211. They're now doing what we call fiscal sponsorships, which means that they're nestling nonprofit organizations to help them grow. And I think they're now at 350 million and like 78 employees. Oh, I'm being told that it's 150 million. Okay, thanks for the update. And like 78 or 80 employees.
The breakthrough and the breakthrough
350 employees. Thanks, Paul.
the breakthrough idea for them, which they got going through our program, was that they could be fiscal sponsors for smaller nonprofit organizations, which is a real win-win for both them and for the nonprofits they sponsor, because it relieves them of a whole lot of the stuff you have to do when you're administering your very own 501c3, which is being watched by state and local and federal agencies of all sorts, blah, blah. And the students. Where has a difference been made? We cannot pass over the difference it's made for students, or for that matter, for mentors. A lot of our academies, we've recruited business people to serve as mentors to some of the customers, either on a special basis, like talk to these people about marketing or help them out with figuring out if their product purchase, if they're the way they plan to buy products makes sense in the market they're in. But in all cases, we leave people with a possibility they didn't have before.
Well, please say more about the students. And one of the things that I think I want to know is, what do they go on to do? And what areas of the university do they come from? I mean, I certainly hear business students are a natural fit for this.
They're mostly business.
Mostly. But we do have a variance. I mean, we have other people, but this one I'm going to run with the first two, and then you can grab.
No, it's yours.
The first trip that we made to Russia, we had a student with us, who now he's left, and every once in a while I get a postcard or an email, and it looks something like, "This is me. This is me at the UN." Later, "This is me feeding the Syrian refugees." Same guy. "This is me assisting at the Paris Accords." Same guy. Now, he went on to have a very successful job, and he's doing really well, and he might be one of those people I should call soon. But literally, like that, like they're a demand to leave this world better. We had another student who jumped out and started a nonprofit organization, and he turned it into a social enterprise, and they just sold the social enterprise, and he still works with a much bigger company, like he's causing it to grow. And he's come to my businesses and stuff just to check in. So they literally can see their life can have not only a purpose, not only making money, but an impact. And there are lots of them. Wong, isn't that her name, Betsy?
I don't know.
Enru.
Oh, yeah.
Anne Wang.
Anne Wang, Unru, yes. Wang.
Yeah, and she went on to be in the Fortune 500 30 under 30 or whatever it is.
Right.
She started that whole business inside of the academy, which was buying goods from other countries and selling them in the United States. So
we have a number of social enterprises that buy that sell products that are made by people either locally who are in the process of getting on their feet because they're transitional youth, or they're formerly homeless, or they're formerly substance abusers, or they live in third world countries where they need a market for their jewelry or their hats or whatever. I mean, that's a whole model. We can do another lecture on the models of social enterprise if you like.
Well, I have a couple more. I have a couple more questions to finish this part of our interview. There are, just those examples that you gave of the students. There are lots of different focuses in the general part of a business education. And I know in the wake of some of the business scandals in the early 2000s, ethics got returned to most business schools as something that, was a requirement that all business students had to go through. As I listen to what the academy is creating and what it opens up for people in their view of how they're going to approach their career. Do you think that there's a future for this essential thing about making a difference is at the heart of the academy that has a role in business schools around the world?
Absolutely. And I think, fortunately, there is much more experimentation going on with creating courses that are more experimental in nature and get people to get their hands dirty addressing issues in the real world than there used to be. And I'm happy to be part of that movement. I feel like at UCLA, Andy, who is as Archie mentioned, is our partner, our campus partner, really went out on a limb when he started this program with me because there was nothing like it. And he was committed that something like this that would teach students how to make a difference as well as how to use what can be a pretty abstract subject, economics, in the real world.
Yeah.
And there is movement in that direction for sure.
Hmm.
And inside of that one, I had a conversation with Andy because I know one of the questions like, what's the future, right? I had a conversation with Andy about I'd like the academies to continue after I retire, since Betsy has all but retired. I saw it, Rochelle, I saw the message, but I can't read it. And Andy said, well, no, there can't be an academies after you retire because who the hell would bring what you bring to the course? I've already gone to all these other schools and they're not doing what we're doing. Now, I got what he sees, but it's not really that. It really is our work. Literally, it's what's missing in those other courses is literally getting to what you pointed to, Seamus, which is having the possibility to speak. And if you take a course just like ours and run it through, it's a business for a generation of business, and you don't put it in, it doesn't function as well and it doesn't make the impact. You gotta have them coming from the possibility of what they're up to. And so, yeah,
Which, by the way, provides for more vitality and more confidence in what you're up to. So, just
Well,
you're kind of getting trained in enrollment and registration over the course of one of our programs. And that's not an accident since I'm, a former staff person, and Archie might as well be.
I like to say that a possibility gives you a permission that you'd never give yourself. The last question, and I gotta I might struggle to formulate this well. The thing that's overwhelmingly present throughout our conversation is the leveraged reach that you have. As you're talking about the impact you've had on those nonprofits that you cited and the students that you cited, it's global. It literally reaches across the world. There's little Archie, there's little Betsy, they're in Southern California, and your work is having an impact in Myanmar. Your work is having an impact in Russia. Your work is having an impact in the Paris Accords. A lot of us, I think it's just normal for most ordinary people, when we look at something that we want to make a difference with, we're intimidated. It's overwhelming. When we're looking at it as an individual. What would you say to somebody who's listening to this interview who wants to make a difference, is experiencing the overwhelm of how big what they want to make a difference with is, about that kind of reach that's possible?
I want to grab this one.
Go ahead.
Famous. The work, landmark, the work. One of my coaches in my program, his name was Chip Royston. He teaches at Cal State Fullerton. And one day he called me and said, will you come and just speak to my class? And I did. Then he called me and said, the students love you. Will you come back again? So I did. And I left there and I went, wow, what it would it be like to be able to teach at a university? And then Betsy called and said, hey, we're going to do this thing at UCLA. You want to go? Seamus, I didn't go to college. Right? What I got was the work, the ability to say what I wanted and have it be real in the world. And I showed up at the classroom and I got a room full of these young kids, brilliant kids, literally 10 times educated beyond where I can play. And I'm dealing with the Stanley Chair of Economics and Betsy Dinsmore. You can't walk in and not be intimidated. It's not possible. I kept going, I didn't go to college. I shouldn't be here. And one day, the Stanley Chair guy, Andy, who I love and adore, leaned over and he said, "Do you know what the letters behind my name mean?" I'm like, "Well, I have an idea." He laughed. He said, "It means that I spent a lot of money to learn what comes to you naturally."
Mm.
And it disappeared, all of that stuff. Literally this year, by this December, Switzerland, HESCO University, and I thought Benoit might be here, will be publishing an article I wrote in their manual. Literally, they came to me and said, "Can you write about the differences between the nonprofits?" So I'm now being published in a college book, but I still didn't go to college. And Betsy will tell you, don't ask me to spell. When you're in the I can't, when you're in like it's bigger than me, you're listening to something other than the possibility that's driving you. Betsy had me enrolled in making this world work, and there was no way any of it was going to beat me. Did that answer your question?
It definitely answers my question. And Betsy, how would you answer that question?
Well, yeah, I would cite all the people who stepped over their fears and their trepidations and did something extraordinary in spite of themselves. I would encourage them to look for people to play with, not to do it alone. And mostly I would stand for anything's possible. And that what looks hard may turn out not to be if they just kind of jump in.
Can I say one more thing about this? I
I-
want to tell you what I got, Seamus, when I was in Russia. Like, what was the gift that trip gave me?
Yeah.
Without hope, there's no resignation.
Hmm.
They lived in a world where there was no hope. So they weren't resigned. They weren't resigned that they were ever going to have a job. They were not resigned about what they could do with their life. They weren't resigned that they couldn't start a business because they never believed they could. And that's the same thing that would have people stop because they look at it and go, they don't think they can. So the resignation isn't really there. Like I
Peas in a
know
jar.
I'm never walking on Mars. I'm not resigned about it. I just know that's not going to happen. But when you get the possibility, anything becomes possible.
And I guess practically speaking, when you're stuck like that, it really makes sense to talk to someone who can be a coach and, invite you to really look and see if there's good reasons to walk away from it or just silly fears that can be set aside. I mean, why do you have to give up? I mean, there's a lot from our training that is crucial to our ability to have people go beyond where they would normally stop.
Well, I really, really thank you for being with us today. It's just an absolute inspiration to be with both of you. And the Academy is truly, truly amazing. Thank you so much for your time and the difference that you're making.